Welcome to EPG Pathshala. We would be discussing the module titled Women as Users of Media Messages. We'll be going through the learning objectives. The objectives of this module are to know the basics of users and gratification theory and cultivation theory, to understand the evolution of our society, how has it impacted women, their standing in the society and their media habits, to understand how women, their tastes and preferences shape media content, and to observe critically mass media content and its consequent impact on women. In this particular module, you would be introduced to two theoretical concepts, the first one being the users and gratification theory of media and the cultivation theory. While the former is about how the audience use the media, the latter focuses on how the media influences its audiences. We would begin the unit with these theoretical concepts, and then we would go on to the social changes, the societal changes that have been taking place in our country, how those changes have impacted the women, their tastes and preferences in terms of media habits. We would look at how their tastes and preferences, or how women as a target audience influence the media content, and how the media programming influences the women in general of the society. We would now go on to the module. So far in this unit, you have learnt about women and their place in our culture. You learnt about the standing of women in our vast mythology, in ancient literature, and also in folk tales. Mythology, literature, and folklore are inseparably weaved with the culture of a region. In fact, they play a significant part in the development of culture itself. The treatment of women in these texts gives an example. The treatment of women in these texts gives an idea about the place of women in our society. From mythology, ancient literature, and folk tales, our society has moved to various forms of media where cultural ideologies are reflected and formed at the same time. In the previous module, you learnt about how most of the media content reinforces the status quo instead of challenging it. In this module, we will focus on how women use media, what are the needs which the media fulfill in their lives. Also, as media content draws heavily from the society and the society in turn is influenced by the media messages, the mutual influence needs to be studied from the perspective of women. The rise of television as a powerful medium is particularly important in this context, as women form a very significant part of the total viewership. We'll move on to the theoretical background. The users and gratification theory. You need to know the basics of users and gratification theory as it deals with what the audience do with the media. While most theories of mass media are centered on the effects that media have on the audience, the users and gratification theory takes the opposite approach and studies the relations between media and audience the other way around, that is, from the perspective of the audience. It answers questions like why different people expose themselves to different media content, or what are the needs that the media satisfy for the viewers. Once you go through the main points of this theory, you will be able to apply it in the context of women and their choice of media content. As per the theory, a person turns to any form of media to satisfy needs from one or more of the following broad categories. The first one is cognitive needs. This category involves the need to know and understand things. The most obvious examples are that of news programs. People watch them primarily for information about what is happening around them and elsewhere. Further examples include shows on channels like on Discovery, National Geographic, etc. Affective needs. These are the needs involving emotional, pleasant, or aesthetic experiences. The media creates scenarios which make the audience feel happy, sad, or exhilarated through the characters, and audience seek such moments in their overall media experiences. The need for personal integration. Every individual seeks reinforcement of his or her personal beliefs externally. Media fulfill this need up to a great extent by portraying content based on different ideologies and beliefs. Media also enable the audience to identify with aspirational sections of the society. Besides this, an individual also develops a deeper understanding of his or her own likes, dislikes, and beliefs by being exposed to varied content. Social integration needs. People have a desire to know about others and their circumstances. It helps them to place themselves in a broader social context, find common aspects with others, have a basis for social interactions, and connect better with family and friends. Social integration also includes developing substitutes for tangible experiences and companionship through media. Tension release. This is perceived as the most common need for which people turn to media. People seek diversion from their everyday lives, a break from their daily routines, and an escape, even if it is temporary, from their problems. When a person sees a character defying odds and overcoming problems, he gets a taste of that experiences. Now we discuss the cultivation theory. We saw, through the users and gratification approach, how the audience use media. It is equally important to know how the media impact audience. Given by George Gerbner, the cultivation theory explains how the media influence thinking and behaviors of its audience. As the popularity of television grew tremendously in the 60s in the United States, Gerbner and his colleagues took up an extensive study to find out the impact of being exposed to violence on television for a long time. The hypothesis of the study was that prolonged exposure to violent content on television leads to a distorted outlook about the world as an unsafe place. The theory states that more time people spend on watching television, the more likely they will be to believe in the reality portrayed on screen. They develop false or misplaced perceptions of the actual world and reality. The two main concepts of this theory are discussed here. The first one being mainstreaming. Mainstreaming is the projection of a common, homogenized reality through the media. As per the theory, heavy viewers of television develop a common outlook towards the world by being exposed to the same ideas and images on the screen. They are themselves not aware of the distortion in their perceptions due to overexposure to media messages. For example, the perception of Indian audience about life in Western countries is heavily shaped from images in Bollywood films or TV shows. It's a well-known fact that the common perception about life in those countries is far from actuality. The reverse case, that is distortion of the perception of Western public about India as an underdeveloped nation, has a lot to do with the portrayal of India as a land of snake charmers and folk dancers in the Western media. The second concept is that of resonance. Resonance is that situation when the real-life circumstances of the viewer match the portrayal on the screen. Resonance increases the susceptibility of a viewer to television's cultivating power. For example, if a child belonging to a lower caste is being teased at school and the same child sees a lower caste character being ridiculed on television, he is very likely to develop a belief that the society is an extremely unfair place for people from lower castes. He might even develop bitterness towards the society in general and upper castes in particular. Resonance amplifies the power of television to construct a false notion of reality among heavy viewers. Changing role of women in society. Women, though not in majority but in large enough numbers, are becoming independent and confident. There are laws protecting their rights and they are becoming more aware of their standing in the society. These changes have affected every aspect of women's lives, starting from broad social norms to their everyday routines. This obviously implies influences on their tastes and preferences for media products. Before studying the interrelations of women and media, it is important to understand the environment in which both women and media function and interact. The following trends have brought about a remarkable change in women's standing in the society and consequently influenced their exposure to and tastes for media content. We begin with literacy. The literacy rate of India as per Census 2011 data is 74.04%. The male literacy rate is 82.14% and female literacy rate is 65.46%. The difference in the male and female literacy rates is indicative of the bias that is present in our society towards men. However, we must keep in mind that India began its journey as an independent nation with a literacy rate of mere 12%, with an even lower proportion of literate females. It can be said that although we are still far from attaining global levels of literacy, but we have made significant progress since independence. It must also be considered that through female literacy as a separate element is the most crucial factor towards women empowerment, the overall literacy rate has also played a role in bringing about a change in the social mindset. An educated society treats its women at par with men and hence provides them equal rights and opportunities. As women are becoming educated and not just literate, they are gaining confidence with their awareness and abilities. They are developing their own views on matters instead of seeing the world through the eyes of their fathers, husbands, or sons. The second point is that of fading out of the joint family system. The joint family system was the most common structure for families until very recently. While the system had many merits, especially for elders and children, it was not always favorable for the women of the family. With many members living in one house, women were engaged in household chores all day. A common or pooled source of income also created problems, leaving the women with no time or mind space for themselves. However, as the service sector expanded, particularly post-liberalization, people were required to relocate in order to work and earn. Families became nuclear, that is, just the husband, wife, and their children. Women were relieved from massive chores and they got time alone on a daily basis. Many women experienced this for the first time in their lives. All this left them with much more time to expose themselves to various forms of media. The third point is that of need for and availability of livelihood. As the service sector expanded, opportunities increased in the job market and the educated women began to take up full-time employment in significant numbers. Also, with ever-increasing cost of living, the need for women to earn additional money started coming up. This was particularly true in rural to urban migration, where both the husband and wife started getting engaged in low-end jobs in order to run their household. Even in the upper middle class, many women earn at par with their husbands and therefore exercise equal authority in all matters. This increased financial independence, accompanied with their new role in sharing responsibilities in the family, has empowered women more than anything else. Networking and interactions outside home. The confluence of the first 3 points discussed herein has led to this fourth outcome, which has broadened the horizons for women further. As they meet and interact with women from different walks of life, they are exposed to wider social, economic, and cultural facets. For example, when a woman working from a village works as a domestic help in an urban middle-class home, she is exposed to broad aspects like the significance of education, fair treatment of a girl child, having fewer children, etc., besides getting to know about many seemingly small but important things, for example, everyday hygiene practices. In this example, even the employer of the domestic help learns about the problems and hardships of women who belong to a societal section different from her own, thus enriching her perspective further. Pro-women initiatives by the government and civil society. A strict regulatory framework in support of women has resulted in a very favorable social environment. Laws against child marriages, dowry, domestic violence, and sexual harassment have provided legal protection to women against these problems. Although not all women avail legal help and hence the problems continue to persist, but the situation is changing with civil societies helping women in getting justice. We now come to trends indicating changes in preferences of women audience. In the previous section, we went through some shifts that took place in our society and led to the position of women getting stronger. These changes had an impact on their exposure levels and tastes and preferences pertaining to media. In today's scenario, television comes up as the most popular medium when we discuss women. It is their daily companion while they are alone, their unwinding post-work, and their source of knowledge and information in many cases. It's not so that women are not exposed to films or radio or online media, but none of these media, barring a few exceptions in certain content, target women as their primary audience. Therefore, when we discuss women as consumers of media messages, we will consider content from all types of media, but television will remain in the center of our discussions. As we studied in the uses and gratification approach, audience turn to media to gratify certain needs of their lives. Here, we will focus on the dominant trends in mass media which are incorporated in the content to attract female audience. We will also discuss the possible needs of women that lead to the popularity of these trends. We begin with female gaze. The male gaze, that is, filming of the female body from the perspective of a heterosexual man, has been common in Indian films for a long time. But the past decade has seen a reversal in the trend where the body of the male star is filmed in a way which is pleasing to the female audience. This trend has made its place on television as well, where only well-built, good-looking men are chosen for lead roles. This was not the case earlier when television programs casted actors based on their acting credentials and whose appearance could blend in with common people. Some very popular shows have even included intimate physical scenes which had never happened on family shows. Print ads of famous clothing and personal care brands strengthen this trend further. The popularity of this trend is a testimony to the fact that women seek pleasure and excitement from the media, a fact which was ignored for a long time in our country. The second trend is that of mild-mannered lead actors. While Indian films have always shown their lead actors as very tough and uptight men, recent films are portraying the male lead as a man who is well-groomed, sophisticated, and not shy of admitting his emotions. Television is no exception in this regard. In fact, some of the most popular episodes of famous soap operas are the ones in which lead actors shed their tough exterior and let their true feelings be known. The leading man in today's media knows how to take care of his partner. He loves her, respects her, and pampers her, quite unlike his counterparts in the 90s or before. The inherent desire of all human beings to be appreciated and taken care of is much stronger in women due to socio-cultural conditioning. Many girls are exposed to princess stories at an early age, and most of them grow up in restricted environments in comparison to the male members of their families, under the protected guidance of the patriarch. Hence, they unconsciously seek a partner who takes care of them instead of taking charge of their own lives, even if they are capable of doing so. This explains the popularity of new age leading men who are sharp, strong, and yet very gentle and caring. The third trend is that of the dominance of affluent class in media content. There is a common trend across films, television, and online media. While online media is accessible only to the somewhat well-off class, films and televisions are available to almost all sections of the society. Films and TV shows in the past, that is 80s and before, mostly carried themes of the rise of the underdog hero, themes from the lives of middle class and rural populations. However, the 90s saw a transition and the content became more focused on the lives of the affluent class, which represented the aspirations of India's growing middle class. The same trend can be seen in television soap operas, where stories are weaved around certain very traditional families, but the setting is of a fairly affluent household. This trend is indicative of two facts. Firstly, most middle-class families find an aspirational value in material well-being and hence prefer to watch such programming as it enables them to vicariously experience affluence. The second point is more obvious, namely the need to momentarily forget about one's own material and emotional problems by watching perfect characters in perfect scenarios. Fashion and aesthetics. Costumes, accessories, makeup, intricacies of sets, all are elements that primarily interest women. Therefore, the emphasis which is laid on these aspects in mass media suggests the significance of women as their target audience. There are programs on entertainment channels that are exclusively made around fashion and lifestyle. Even Discovery Network, known for its highly informative and well-researched content, has TLC, formerly Travel and Living Channel, in its bouquet of channels. These programs give women a chance to know about the material luxuries of life and hence try to acquire them as far as possible. We can see the personal integration aspect here, as such content enables them to identify with the elite section of the society. The fifth one is that of gossip columns and programs. Gossip columns around the lives of film stars have been common in newspapers and magazines for a long time. Some gossip shows have been there on television as well. However, now we see dedicated gossip sections even on news channels, FM, and social networking platforms. These segments or programs seem similar to the lifestyle content discussed in the previous point, except for the fact that this is more inclined towards the need for social integration. It gives the viewers, mostly women, entertaining topics for conversation and hence the chance to bond with their peers. The last trend is that of growing focus on children. With increasing number of nuclear families and strengthening financial standing of the middle class, women now have more time and resources at their disposal. In a nuclear family, children usually become the center of all future and financial plans. Modern mothers are spending much more time planning their child's education, entertainment, and grooming. This reflects in media content as well, as we see more and more consumer good companies using children in their ads, insurance companies guaranteeing a safe future for children, cartoon channels running around the clock, reality shows on a hunt for the next little superstar, and an unusually high proportion of online portals discussing various aspects of motherhood and childcare. The recent focus of media on children is a reflection of the aspiration of new parents, particularly mothers, for their children. So in this particular unit titled Women as Users of Media Messages, you got a basic overview of the users and gratification theory and the cultivation theory. The first one dealing with how the audience use the media, and the latter dealing with how the media influences its audience. We took a broad overview, we took a very broad look about the changes that have taken place in our society in the past few years and how those changes have affected women, mostly in a positive way. We saw how these changes have affected not only the lives of women but their tastes and preferences for media content. After that, we discussed the trends which are indicative of the fact that women are forming the core target audience of the media today, particularly television. The trends we discussed can be seen in most of the programming, not only on television, but also in films, news media, and online media content. In the end, we discussed about how this programming is still continuing to affect the mindset of the people and women themselves about their own role and position in the society.